Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of The Way It Is, and I'm your host, Luca with Remax Service First Realty here in Kingston. And continuing along our political journey, we're fortunate to have with us Ted Hsu, who's representing the Liberal Party in this provincial election here for Kingston and the Islands. Ted grew up in Kingston. He knows it well. It's been his pleasure to serve this area as a member of Parliament from 2011 to 2015. He was the co-chair of the Mayor's Task Force on Housing in 2019 and executive director of Switch, which was a sustainable energy and green jobs network from 2007 to 2011. He is a former scientist and financial executive who brings an innovative approach to problem solving to take on the challenges faced by our city, region, and province. Welcome, Ted.
Hey, good to be here, Luca.
So I guess to get into it, and I am a bit of a, I guess I'll fall into the camp of being a bit of a political junkie. I do follow it, both federally and provincially. More and more, I am sadly getting disenchanted with the process and those that participate, and that's certainly nothing against, nothing to disparage you at all. The Liberal plan. How do you feel that will sort of filter down for us here in Kingston, I guess? What aspects of it will have a real impact here in Kingston?
I think a lot of the plan will. There's multiple pages on housing, for example, which is the thing that I hear the most about at the door. Kingston, of course, is one of the epicenters in Canada of the sharp increase in house prices, but it was already a well-recognized problem before the pandemic. So we have a lot of measures, everything from the overall goal of building 1.5 million homes over 10 years, and that includes a lot of affordable homes, supportive and community homes, homes for Indigenous people, all the way from that to helping cities with the process of approval. So this is money for example, cities to hire more planners to process the applications, or this maybe doesn't apply so much in Kingston's situation, but to digitize the process of applying to do all the paperwork to get buildings built and the plans approved. And it goes to money for housing co-ops as an innovative way of producing more housing that is affordable. We're going to try to allow commercial and retail spaces that are not being used to be switched for housing. That's a big trend across North America. For example, in the United States, they had poor regulations and they way overbuilt shopping malls. Yeah. And now there's all this land that is being converted to housing. So that's something that we can do in Canada. It's really interesting. The old Frontenac Mall. The old Frontenac Mall has some plans for housing, and so it's not surprising that that's part of a trend. And one of the things I noticed in the last few years is and I think everybody knows this, the old Kingston Shopping Centre. Yeah. There's land there. It's right by a transit hub. It's right near schools and churches and stores, and it's that's, I think, a prime place for potential housing developments.
Yeah, no, and I know during the pandemic, obviously when everyone was remote working, and now they're in that juxtaposition of who wants to go back, who isn't going to go back, who wants to stay remote, and the hybrids in between. But surely to goodness, I mean, Kingston, not so much because we're not developed so much that way, but there's certainly, I think, a lot of office towers around the province that are still sitting half empty or whatever that would fit into that sort of retrofit model, if you will. So
yeah, we just have to make it easy to make that change. Sometimes zoning changes are needed. There's questions about there's just a lot of paperwork sometimes to make those changes, and we want the Ontario Liberal platform is willing to put some money behind its willingness to help municipalities process applications in a responsible way, but to do it faster so that delays aren't causing people to wait for housing.
So, and I was very intrigued by, because I wasn't aware of this, that you were the co-chair of the task force on housing in 2019. I'm not going to lie, I haven't read through the document to see what the bones of it are. But I guess if you can, maybe give us some of the highlights, and then follow through with what's been acted on to date, and what still needs to happen with that.
Sure. I think, well, one of the highlights locally was to get all of to have a unified set of zoning bylaws updated for the whole of city of Kingston, because Kingston was spending a lot of time processing exceptions to the zoning bylaws, because people knew the actual practice was different from what the bylaws were, because the bylaws were old. And so a lot of the time of planners was taken processing these exceptions. Now that Kingston is moving towards a modernized set of bylaws for the whole city, a lot of applications won't need to be filed, because they'll be covered by the new bylaws. The practice will coincide with the laws, and I think that is a good thing that has been acted on. But there are a lot more things that we need to do. One of the main pushes in that, a lot of municipalities, a lot of people who thought about housing in cities recognize that we need to push for more middle market housing. This is more modest housing. So it could be smaller housing, it could be housing with less parking, it could be denser housing. But we need to push for middle market housing, just because that is where we can provide a lot of affordability in the private market. So deeply affordable housing needs public support to be built. But
100%.
The public sector is just one part of our economy, and actually the capacity to build resides in the private sector. So if we can provide incentives or for the private sector to build more modest housing, the missing middle is a term that people use in cities across North America. The middle market housing, more modest housing that's more affordable, that will help relieve the housing crisis. And you might think that the middle market housing is different from affordable housing, but actually what happens is that people who cannot afford average modest housing, they will go and rent cheaper housing, lower quality housing, and they'll squeeze out people at lower incomes. And this squeezing keeps going down the income scale, and the people at the bottom just left with nothing. So part of the solution is for government to build affordable housing, and the Ontario Liberal Platform has money to help keep affordable housing affordable, and to pay for affordable housing, to finance affordable housing. But we also have to make sure that that pressure from higher income households is relieved by building more middle market housing.
So, and I mean, getting to the point of affordability, because obviously that's very top of mind given in the world we live in today and operate in. If anybody, of course, I mean, the old cliche, and it's becoming quite cliche, sadly, but going to the grocery store, filling up your tank of gas is certainly jarring these days in terms of the effect on people's pocketbooks. I know there's a platform there to increase the minimum wage. And I watched, again, I'm a CBC and TVO junkie a bit. And there was, I can't remember the fellow, but I think he represented the Chamber of Commerce for the province, if I'm not mistaken. And it's easy to say, let's increase the minimum wage. But, a lot of these businesses coming out of COVID or coming out of the pandemic, they're entrepreneurs, they're self-employed individuals. You can't lay all of that down at their feet. So, I mean, what's the plan to help subsidize that wage? Because I don't disagree with you. I think if everyone has a wage that they can afford to operate through the world, 100%, it helps the economy. Yeah. I get all of that. I get the trickle down effect of that. But where do you start with that?
Yeah, that is a really important question. I've spoken to many businesses, and they're having staffing shortages, they're having supply chain disruptions, and it's something that the government needs to deal with because it's bigger than any particular business. So there are a lot of things. One of the big things in the Ontario Liberal Platform is to create a package of benefits for workers that stay with the worker. Even if they change jobs or they work independently or they're a gig worker. And that would be something that the government would finance and relieve the pressure on employers who are not able to hire people because employees are looking for basic benefits like some sort of pharmacy, drug coverage or dental coverage or whatever. So we want to have a package of basic benefits that follows the worker. There will be incentives for small businesses to contribute to the cost of that package in terms of a tax break. I think employers will want to contribute something because they'll want to compete for employees. We want a situation where businesses are competing for employees. We're also going to do things to increase the availability of labor. And there's some very subtle things. For example, right now on ODSP, first of all, we have to increase ODSP because it hasn't been adjusted for inflation. But we're going to increase ODSP, but we're also going to increase the threshold at which the clawbacks occur. So right now, if you're on ODSP and you earn more than $200 a month, the extra amount gets clawed back. So you really don't have an incentive to work a lot.
Yeah.
We're going to increase that limit from $200 a month, so a monthly cap, to $6,000 annually. So let's say you're on ODSP and you have some mental health problems. Sometimes, and I know somebody like this, there are months where you're feeling good and you work. Yeah. And then there's other months where you have trouble getting out of bed because of your mental health. Well, that kind of person is going to be able to work full time for the months that they can work, because that cap at which the clawbacks start is going to be applied annually, and it's going to be much larger, more than twice as large, applied annually instead of monthly. So that's actually going to increase the availability of labor for small business. So there's little subtle things like that can help. The other thing we want to do for businesses is, if you were hard hit by the pandemic, we're going to cut your corporate taxes to zero for 2 years. We want to pay for affordable before and after school daycare, and that will increase the availability of labor. And let me say one last thing, at the risk of going on for too long. I want to contrast the Liberal plan to replace minimum wage. Now, and I just want to contrast that with the NDP. The NDP has this plan to increase minimum wage to $20 an hour. The Liberals would like to change that to a regional dynamic living wage. So what does that all mean? Well, the idea behind a regional living wage is we're going to look at the cost of living in different parts of the province. Right. And we're going to have something like a minimum wage, but we're going to call it a living wage because it's going to be connected to what is the cost of living in that part of the province. And I was never able to answer small businesses who said, why do I have to pay the same minimum wage in rural Eastern Ontario as in downtown Toronto? It doesn't make sense because everything costs less in rural Eastern Ontario compared to downtown Toronto. So we want to have a living wage that is different in different parts of the province. So from a business point of view, it means that it will be less expensive to hire people where the cost of living is lower. We also want it to be dynamic. And what that means is, and we're going to have to sit down with stakeholders like business and labor groups and say, how can we adjust this living wage automatically with inflation so that it doesn't become a big political question where you have to wait till the next election to see what your costs are going to be. That will provide more certainty for businesses so that you can, certainty is always better. A lot of business is about, you got an idea and you got to de-risk it, right? You got to take away all the things that go wrong. So if we can remove that uncertainty about the cost of labor, that will help a lot. So regional dynamic living wage. And one of the things I like about the policies that working on policy is, and that's why I feel more at home in the Liberal Party, is we can come up with these, it's a little more complicated, a little more detailed, but I think it's also a more thoughtful policy. And of course, you always have to sit down with stakeholders to hammer out all the details. You should never assume that you've thought of everything.
Yeah.
But I think this is a better alternative to what we've been doing so far with
I
the
mean,
minimum wage.
I'm buying in so far on the surface of it. Certainly, by from a high level perspective, no question about it. And because you're absolutely right. I mean, this is people always underestimate the massive size of the geography of this province and how many different regions and how you can go from one end of it to the other and see the disparity in wages, in employment, in everything for sure. So you touched on ODSP. And then in part of the platform is also rent control, and I know that's a sensitive subject in Ontario, and I know that got a lot of play during COVID with so the freezes on certain things, and I mean I was a landlord, I'm a landlord again. I do consider myself somewhat of an entrepreneur in business for self, and I know I see both sides of it, but I guess for me, because I've seen the abuse and I've seen the systemic breakdown of those systems. And so I guess it's great to, I'm all about empowering people and getting them out of their situations. But I guess for me, those that are sort of more right of center would also say, well, there's just too much abuse. There's just too much, you know what I'm saying, going on. How do you get those checks and balances to stop that?
One of the things in our platform is we want to clear the backlog at the landlord and tenant board. So we're putting $15 million a year towards that. And I've heard a lot of stories actually from the toughest one was somebody who was recently widowed and they have a house that they own that's their nest egg, and it provides an income, and the tenants stopped paying rent. And they haven't got rent for half a year, and they can't do anything about it because the landlord tenant board is so backlogged. And that's not the only. And I've heard I can almost say the names of like 3 other small landlords that have had similar problems. So we really need to clear that backlog to be fair to everybody. Every case is different. That's why you need a board to hear the 2 sides. And in some cases, the landlord might be more responsible. In some cases, the tenant might be more responsible. But it's the backlog has to be cleared so that we can move on and try to have because if things are not fair, people are not going to want to rent out their apartments. They're just going to say, well, I'm going to rent it out a few weekends a year in Airbnb. I don't want to deal with any problems. If any problems with a tenant comes up, it's never going to be resolved. And so I think it would be better for the whole system if we put some money in and got cleared out the backlog. So that's why there's $15 million a year in the Ontario Liberal platform to help clear out this backlog.
Yeah. I touched on this with Zachary there from the Green Party, and I'll touch on it with you because I know education is a focus. However, I got and I listen. We've got a generation of kids that are in a real risk of coming out of this thing ill-equipped to deal with the challenges going forward of post-secondary
and this is
education.
A worldwide problem.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. No, I get it. Listen, it's scary to think what the fallout's going to be, and we really won't know for years to come. But my bigger focus, I mean, elementary schools, for sure. I mean, we need teachers. We need more teachers. We need more EAs. We need more specialized care, for those that have disabilities, mental or otherwise, in the the public or the elementary school system. But post-secondary and, especially trades, because we're living in a world now where you touched on it. There's a lack of skilled trades. And that's, we're in a generation where yourself and myself and that generation is dying off or retiring out of their trades. You can't be a bricklayer for 70 years or into your 70s. You can't do drywall into your 70s. You can't, you know what I'm saying? So where are the components of that, I guess, in that education money that's being spent? Is there anything attached to that side of it?
Yeah, there's money for skills training and encouraging people to go into the skilled trades to expand the people who think about going into the skilled trade. So in the last, and this is not a partisan thing, and I would say in the last in the last 10 years or so, there's been an emphasis on, hey, maybe more women could get into the trades, or new immigrants or Indigenous Canadians could be given the incentive to think about going into the trades. We just want to expand the pool, and it's out there. There's people who can do it. We just have to change our culture a little bit, because I think we undervalued the skilled trades, and that's why we have one of the reasons why we have a shortage right now. And as you said, you talked about retirement age. You often, if you're doing physical work, you need to retire earlier, and there has to be a recognition of that. People say, "Oh, 75 is the new 65." Not if your work is doing is physical, and there's wear and tear on your back. That's probably the biggest thing that causes people to retire early. So that's absolutely an emphasis, and it's really tied to the biggest thing that I hear at the door, which is housing and the cost of living. If you want to fight inflation without, in the early 80s, they fought inflation by ramping up interest rates and causing deep recession. That's a painful way to deal with inflation. But ultimately the way to deal with inflation is by improving the productivity of labor, and the more skills people have, the more training for the crucial jobs in the economy we have, the better we can deal with inflation. If you're missing a crucial worker, the whole work group, the whole factory floor shuts down because you don't have the right person. And even simple things like I was ordering flyers for my election campaign, and we had a delay of 2 or 3 days, and I was like, out of the blue, like, hey, we're not getting our flyers, and it was a shipping. It was like, no driver. Like, you've got to have the people to do the jobs when the jobs need to be done, and they need to know how to do the jobs, especially the higher skilled jobs. And so labor force development is a really important part of productivity, and productivity ultimately is the ultimate thing that you need to fight inflation.
Yeah. If we're gonna change direction a little bit here, and maybe make you a little uncomfortable, but I don't know if you watched the leaders' debate. I probably dare say you did.
I did. Yeah. Watched,
I did.
Most of it,
I did too. I can't say I was excited about it. I mean, it had its moments, I suppose, but given the polls, given everything else, it seems like potentially the fight is now going to become for second between yourselves and the NDP. Mm-hmm. Given Andrea Horwath's performance, I think she sunk the ship. But anyway, that's just my personal opinion. But let's say Doug Ford gets in again. You're elected here in Kingston. Now you're a lonely island. How do you affect some of these policies? How do you affect change here in your in your area for Kingstonians, for your constituents?
Yeah. Well, I've been in that position before. I got elected in 2011. That was the year that Stephen Harper got a Conservative majority, but I beat the Conservative candidate here in Kingston. It's I think, first of all, let me say that 4 years ago, voters voted for the NDP. They chose the NDP to be the official opposition, and I think I would approach criticizing the government in power in a different way. You can't just attack them. It's attacking. It makes good sound bites. It's entertaining, but politicians have thick skin, and voters are kind of tired of parties attacking each other. What you've got to do is you've got to win over some of the middle of the road supporters of. So I'm going to speak from a partisan point of view.
Absolutely.
My way of looking at things is you've got to win over some of their voters, some of their middle of the road supporters, and you don't do that by entertaining attacks that get sound bites in the news. So one of the things you need to do, I think, is, first of all, you criticize the ministers, but you criticize them legitimately. You don't take cheap shots. And what I found in my time as MP is that you get a certain respect, and you get recognized in the back offices of the other parties when you do that. I've even had ministers and ministers' offices phone me to say thank you for not taking that cheap shot, which you think well, our business is not to help the the
Yeah.
conservative ministers, but the thing is that they remember when you made an honest criticism and you didn't take a cheap shot, and which means that if you need to organize a meeting for somebody in your riding, you need to make an ask. They'll listen to you because they remembered that you were careful in what you said and your criticisms were real, and that's one thing to do. I mean, you've got to, when you stand up in question period, you've got to find those. You've got to do your research and figure out how you can improve on what the government's doing. You've always got to do that. And you've got to draw attention to that. But I think that you can do it in a respectful way, in a way that gets attention. And if you aren't on the government side, I think the ministers will know, like, oh, we don't want to make Ted mad at us, so we better do something for his constituents, because Ted is capable of criticizing us and exposing the mistakes that we made, and the press is going to believe him because he's honest. I mean, I'm saying that this. No. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but this is my strategy, and I think that's how you can get things done in opposition.
And at the risk of sounding colloquial, I mean, it was evident at the strategy of the other parties against Mr. Del Duca. But, you know, how do you get the stink of Kathleen Wynne's legacy off of your you know, especially if you're going to be, like you said, approaching these middle of the road PC or NDP constituents that maybe are on the fence right now or rethinking their you know, their situation. So.
Well, yeah, voters sent the Liberals into the penalty box for 4 years, double minor.
Well, I think that was a major, actually, to be honest with you.
But I think Stephen Del Duca has taken the first step by having a completely new, I would say about 90% of the candidates are completely new. And it's a really dynamic group of candidates with a lot of experience outside of politics. So people who work in healthcare, people who work in education, there's people who work in business and municipal administration. So a lot of really important areas. And he's let these people contribute to the election platform. So what you see, you know, traditionally, the old way of writing election platforms, you have some people and they work in secret, and there's a reason why you work in secret. It's so that nobody knows who to lobby to try to influence the platform, because then you can never get any work done. But because you got to balance some things, you got to make choices. So you want to do that
for sure.
But in this, what Stephen Del Duca has done, he's allowed the public, first of all, to have input, and then he's chosen a really diverse, new, energetic group of candidates, and he's allowed them to tweak the platform before it was presented to the public. So I think that's one thing, and ultimately it takes time to regain the trust of people that you might have lost, and so we're working at it. And so far we've rebounded. I think the Liberals are well ahead of where we were in the election of 2018. We're consistently ahead of the NDP. Almost every poll shows us significantly ahead of the NDP. So we're getting there, but by no means should we have to learn the lessons from that last term in government. We need to remember them. And we just need to work hard to earn the trust of voters.
Yeah. I won't keep you too much longer. So I guess I'll sort of segue to the last part of this, because I know, you know, all voters of all stripes. I mean, all these platforms. It's all about, you know, the costing of all these plans, because they're fantastic and they're grandiose, and if they all were to be able to come to fruition, we might very well solve all these problems. But they got to be paid for. So, and I know, you know, even Mr. Del Duca during the debate said it's all been costed. But I just went on the site and I didn't see a number for it. So what's the number, and where's the money coming from?
Yeah. So you, the way to get the full costing document, which is about 6 pages long, so it's got 6 pages of lines and lines and lines. Yeah. There's a platform page on the Ontario Liberal website. And on the platform page, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a detailed version of the platform. And then there's a whole separate document about the costing, and you look at the
Okay.
and there's a summary at the end of that document. But we're looking at getting to a balanced budget in 2026. So we know that we need to spend right now to recover from the pandemic. Just as for example, there's $125 million just for the next 2 years to help tourism recover. That's going to be really important for Kingston. But we're looking at a balanced budget by 2026. Now, having said that, Stephen Del Duca has said we've got the numbers for that projection, but if people need help, he's going to be flexible. He's not going to leave people behind just for the sake of getting to an exact budget balance in 2026. But the numbers are there, and you can look at them, and you can see how much money is going for different things, for housing, for upgrading our healthcare capacity, for supporting homeless, for investments in. There's also loan guarantees for small business who want to invest and grow out of the pandemic. There's an accounting for the tax cuts to small businesses that have been hurt by the pandemic, and everything. 6 pages long.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for pointing that out. I think we'll end it there because I know you're on a tight timeline. You've got another debate to do at noon. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for taking the time. And maybe we'll do a follow-up depending what the outcome of the election is then, one way or the other. So all the best, Ted.
I look forward to that. And thanks for reaching out and giving me the chance to meet you and talk to you on your podcast.
Yeah, I very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.